brand.
That's our second cliffhanger into the structure. We're going to lead the people along, but let me maybe say there's a couple things I'd like to add. Number one, I'd like to make a disclaimer because you and I have a very similar style, and it's the reason why my nickname is the PM Cowboy. Some people say, that cowboy is somebody who shoots and then asks questions. No, I'm not that type of cowboy. But cowboys are selective when they speak, but when they speak, they're fairly direct. It's kind of no nonsense. Let's make a disclaimer for all those executives who might feel like we're stepping on their toes. If you feel that we're stepping on your toes, maybe that would be a red flag for you to consider how this is resonating with you, because we are not here to poo-poo on executives. We have absolute empathy for executives. You are in an executive position. I've been in an executive position several times. It's not an easy job to be in. And having to come to terms with having a huge amount of responsibility and a lack of immediate skill sets to always solve them is a paradox. I often say the number one skill set that a leader has to develop is the ability to be comfortable with the unknown, but with the proactive stance of being able to figure it out, primarily by relying on the people below them to support them. And that's part of leadership culture. So what I love about what you said is step one, starting at the top. I think most people would agree with you, but I'm going to tell you my real life experience. In a lot of the companies where I do leadership trainings or coaching, it's kind of often a remote leadership group who wants to stay in headquarters and don't write me, don't call me unless it's a special occasion or because I'm busy. And then they'll come to me and say, yeah, we lack in leadership in the organization. And they said, you know what? Let's like a salt shaker. Let's do some leadership trainings in the middle, right? And my experience is the middle is very receptive to this kind of stuff, but I often get kind of the indirect feedback. This is great, and we would love to do some of this stuff, but I wish my manager was here. It's not supported by the top. So for me to do this would be me going out on thin ice.
Yeah, and you hear, I wish my manager was here listening to what you're telling us, what we're discussing, Hayssam.
Yeah. So that's that.
That's an indicator.
The second thing I want to underline, the second step after dealing with the top is you go right down, you work your way through the bottom, right? And I'm assuming you do a lot of the things that I do. You go to lunch with people, right? You go you hang out in the coffee room. You know, I often say I don't smoke cigarettes, but if people go smoke cigarettes, I often go with them, right? I usually say I'm an external consultant and look at me suspiciously. But, you know, if you talk to them for 10 minutes, if you talk to them for about 10 minutes, they'll test you. Now, what's he made of? Can he take some critical thought? And then, when they realize you're listening, you get all this wealth of feedback and insight into a company that most companies would pay a lot of money to get, right? And, sometimes you write a report for upper leadership, and the first feedback that I often get from them is, how do you know so much about my company? I said, because I asked your staff. I talked to your staff, right? So the second part is management by walking around, which is a gold principle of leadership. What's your third step after kind of identifying the gaps? What's the next step?
So the next step is getting down to, how do we make that work? How do we then link what the top is thinking and doing and saying to what is really happening in the front line is we sit down with the right stakeholders, and depending from one organization to each other, could be L&D, could be HR, could be the operations team, could be the executive committee, whatever it is, right? You say, right, guys, this is what our finding is all about here. So, we are going to make sure that whatever we deliver is going to speak the languages of both the management, the middle management, and the frontliners. And then there has to be accountabilities at all three levels. Then we need to ensure that if managers are accountable, and because how we say, that leaders are responsible. What about practicing accountability? You hold yourself accountable for certain things rather than saying, oh, well, I'm putting you through some training, guys, and you guys should be able to fix it. And the guys are going, oh, could you come down here for a few days and just sit with us and understand what the hell's going on here? So, but when the leader goes, listen, this is where we believe I've gone wrong, and this is what we need to, what do you think? And this is the findings. And if those findings are spot on, and then the leadership at all levels kind of say, yep, we've dropped the ball here, and that's what we're gonna do. And then remember what we said, there's a responsibility from the team towards the leaders, and then we're going to challenge the team members is, what are you going to do towards making sure you support your leadership? Because I'm not going to sit there and vilify the leaders only. I'm going to say, what are you doing? What are you doing to make sure that if you want to be happy and if you want to manage upwards, what are you going to do? What's your responsibility, not just towards your objective, but also towards your leadership? Because now your leadership saying, we're going to lay it out on the line. I'm going to wear my heart on my sleeve. I'm going to be vulnerable and hold myself accountable for certain things.
So there's
many different things that could be done within an organization when it comes to employee engagement. And by the way, employee engagement program could be so bloody simple. A lot of people think that employee engagement is about, getting together and having some team building activities and playing a little bit of foosball in the break room. That's bullshit. Engagement is about listening, providing people a platform to talk and voice out and do it on a regular basis. That's what engagement is all about, and get people feel that I'm part of that organization.
A colleague of mine recently told me about an experience that he had where he was called in to do a master retreat for an executive team. And he was called in, and they basically told him, listen, don't give us so many inputs. Let's just do a lot of games. And they basically did one game after the other, these things where you build bridges or, lavas, and all the wonderful games. And he said it was probably one of the most frustrating experiences for him. And they at the end, he got great feedback. Everybody loved it. But the red flag, I guess you would immediately say, you're probably hearing a couple of red flags already, is what is the executives team's commitment to even be open to reflect, not just, hey, we're here to have fun, okay, but what are these games actually teaching us? What's the metaphor? What's the analogy? What consequence does it have for us in an operational setting? Was lacking, and he said it was probably one of the most frustrating workshops that he had ever had. But to put it into different words, so what you say for you, step number 3, and you say it with such, with such experience, but I want to make sure for those who don't have your experience that they have this simple to follow structure. So number 1, you talk with top leadership and you do your assessments there. Number 2, you work your way down to the bottom and gather information and identify gaps.
From the bottom, absolutely.
Yeah. Number 3, you create you start developing a master plan that entails a bunch of different things. An identification.
I call it the stakeholder canvas.
Yeah. What's
stakeholder canvas?
What are the stakeholder environment? What are the different roles and responsibility? What are the different levels in the organization? You probably intertwine that with what from a strategic level, what's wanted, from a tactical level, what's relevant, and what's on an operational level, what would be practiced. You also said something which I absolutely agree. If you can't measure something, you can't improve it, right? Accountability you were talking about. But what are we measuring and how are we measuring? And in German there's a wonderful saying, if you measure the wrong thing, what you end up getting is crap. And the funny thing is, measuring is in German and crap are words that are very, very close to one another, right? So wer misst, kriegt Mist, which means if you measure garbage, that's what you get, right? So so what you do is you create a structure, a framework, maybe probably also vocabulary, right? I'm guessing that a lot of this also has to do with individual coaching, team coachings, and trainings that you do then throughout the organization.
Exactly. So there is, we look at it. You're a project manager. You've got those pillars. Yeah. But on top of the pillars is the architects. And who are the architects? Are the management. Yeah. But every strong structure has a great foundation, correct? And that foundation is actionable education. Actionable education, meaning that when you deliver training and educate your team, they have to put it in action, not just to tick a box. Oh, we've trained our teams last year on multiple disciplines. Well, how do they put it in action? So
Yeah.
obviously I can sit down and talk to you about actionable education for 3 days, but that's the message we want to send out to our listeners, is that you have to make sure that the training is actionable. So then it becomes the foundation of that architecture.
Yeah.
And the pillars are, what are those skills that are then tangible, that make sure that the architects are doing the right job.
Yeah.
So it's really, they speak to each other, right? The frontliners, what are the foundations? And by the way, the foundations are for both the frontliners, middle managers, and senior managers.
Yeah.
That's the actionable education. That's the training where it has to deliver result. And that's what makes a great training company from just another training company.
The analogy I'm kind of coming up in my head, it's kind of maybe a little bit cheesy, but I think it's good. Top down, you've got the sun and the rain. Bottom up, you've got the earth that needs to be plowed. It needs to be receptive. You need to de-weed it. You need to make sure that it's plowed.
Super.
Then you sow the seed, because I think a lot of people, when they do trainings, it's kind of like they take a handful of really powerful and valuable seed and they just kind of throw it out there, right? And our job, and it's not always easy, is to, no matter how jaded the people are, is to motivate them and excite them and give them belief again that there's a possibility that things might change. But I always strongly encourage my clients when they book trainings with me, don't just book a training, but let's do a follow-up. Let's make an actionable learning. Let's make it, let's say, okay, we're going to meet and commit to something that you're going to do, right? Let's write it down. Let's follow up, right? Often that gets sacrificed to the day-to-day work. People say, we don't have time for that. Yeah, but a seminar is not going to change your culture. It's just going to...
No, it's not.
It's like watching a movie.
It might impact it a little bit. It might change some attitudes and some behaviors, but it's not going to be strategic.
Yeah, it's kind of like watching a romance movie and say, that I felt like I'm in love, and now it's going to happen for me. No, that's not how it works. Absolutely. I think this actionable learning thing is definitely a key.